Okay, so up next is our Managing Director and Lead Strategic Architect, Consultant and Trainer, Nigel Schmalkuche. He is a leader in strategy, data, AI, and enterprise architecture, and has guided government across levels, primarily in Australia, through digital business transformation. Nigel has many years' experience as a coach and trainer for strategic architects and has facilitated training courses in strategic architects' strategic architecture approach through digital business transformation to over 500 participants for over 20 courses in Australia, New Zealand, USA, and Canada. Nigel has written 2 books, AI and Data Strategy and Data to Insight, that demonstrates his experience in enterprise and data architecture, and is here with us today. So welcome, Nige.
Yeah, how you going? You can hear
I'm
me. I had my microphone off because I thought you don't want to hear all that loud breathing of mine. I thought, yeah, I better take it off. So yeah, no, I do. I actually feel a little bit more relaxed. You get a few
good.
get a few nerves in the when you're running these sorts of things. But
We're
yeah,
all friends here.
appreciate that. It definitely helped. So thanks for
Good.
getting us in the zone.
Yeah, awesome. So, Nige, you and I, we have done quite a bit of work together. But to kick off your presentation, could you please describe the strategic architecture approach and how it can be the key to digital transformation?
Yeah, thanks, Jackie. And I wanted to have this session towards the start, just to give the whole conference a bit of a feel about strategic architecture and the approach that we do. So I'll just flick on to that next screen. What it is that high level of strategic architecture approach is something that has been talked about a little bit, like over the years. One of the things that I've found is it's not talked about as much as, say, enterprise architecture or business architecture or program management, etc. So the way we've put it together is the 3 levels. You've got the digital strategy, you've got the enterprise architecture, and the program delivery, and that holistic approach, strategic architecture approach to the development of architectural products. We concentrate mainly on government, and that directs and guides the development of that strategic outcomes, business outcomes that you can achieve. Um, so there's not much written about it, but I did find in particular when I was studying to be an enterprise architect many years ago, the Open Group Architecture Framework TOGAF, it did talk a little bit about strategic architecture, and it defined it as a long-term summary view of the entire enterprise, and a framework for organizing operational and change activity. So that's what their definition was. So it was a fairly broad definition, and definitely you could say that the business side of things and the business strategy is very important as far as that's concerned. But strategic architecture, I guess, is just more than just business strategy, which is really around that strategic planning side of things. So it's more than just strategic planning, but it's also more than enterprise architecture, which really does get into the layers of architecture, which is business information, data, applications, and the technology side of things. So more than that as well, and it's also more than the strategic planning. But what we've found is sort of applying strategic architecture, particularly to digital transformation. We always ensure that it's aligned to the business strategy, the business strategic goals, operational models, yeah, that may need to change, and making sure that that organizational change for the digital transformation is in step with the business. So it definitely is a key part of that. So we do talk a lot more about it, and it is one of the things that particularly appeals to senior leaders, because there's a lot of complexity with digital transformation. And if you can reduce that complexity, uh, the strategic architecture approach works pretty well. So strategic architecture uses that approach, and we develop our strategic outcomes from that. Just a little bit more detail with what the strategic architecture is about. If you look at the three boxes in a bit more detail, the digital strategy, the enterprise architecture, and program delivery, essentially we're trying to keep those in sync. And I think it was just yesterday, Jazz, I was talking to you about the sync bit and how you get that arrangement. It's really trying to keep this strategy in sync with the program delivery, and then making sure that the architecture is the one that is making that in sync. Because really, when you're dealing with the digital strategy and you're dealing with executives, they don't need to know the really technical aspects of solution architecture and what that includes. However, they want to know that you're doing it correctly. So you've got to come to a point where you can explain that well and draw that out into, an executive summary, something that can really explain it well for the executives. And what I've found is some of the big transformational programs, you might have 400, the sponsor might have 400 people under them. They're not going to know all the detail, but they need to know that that can be summarized for them, and that's what strategic architecture can do. So as you see there, it guides the development of the future for your organization, that strategy, but then that architecture translates that and makes sure that that happens within the program delivery. And that's that sort of evolving architecture approach that we talk about. But when you're out in the programs, and the project managers here will know that you're talking to the customers, you're coming up with things that suddenly you say, okay, well, hang on, the strategy's not right here. We've got to focus a bit more on customer experience. We've got to focus more on accessibility for the users, these types of things. And there's a whole range of those things. That then feeds back to the architecture. So then we update the strategy. So really the digital strategy needs to be updated every year at a minimum. So I guess the digital strategy has that vision alignment. So has that overarching vision, objectives, and you're able to have that clear purpose and drives that design of the enterprise architecture and program delivery. So the strategy sets the strategic priorities. It identifies those priorities. We make sure, as enterprise architects, we make sure that the roadmap is done in collaboration with the senior executives to make sure that the strategy is reflected in the roadmap and the initiatives that come out of that. And that consultative approach is key to developing the good strategy, the good vision, the strategic priorities, the themes that come up there. And I'll talk a little bit about themes later, but the themes is really has to come from your senior executive. It's no good coming with preset themes that don't align to what they need. So then the enterprise architecture is that blueprint. So you're translating that strategy into the structure of your program, your program management what you're doing with your executive initiatives. So your high level goals, your blueprint of your people, process, information, and technology, which is a lot of the business architecture, and your principles, your standards, your models. And there's a whole range of models that I won't get into today, but you might have, say, a strategy model canvas, which is an update to the business model canvas. You might have a business capability model where you can really center people on different initiatives, those sort of things. So we've got a big tool bag, I suppose, the enterprise architects have. Can enable flexibility, scalability. So the EA designs can have modular components. So modern systems have modular rather than more fixed legacy systems that can't be changed easily. And that allows the program delivery to implement solutions more easily and in an agile fashion, as well as in a I guess more waterfall sort of fashion that we used to do. Cross-functional alignment, so the EA can foster that understanding across the department. Potentially you can have business reference groups set up to collaborate and obviously the architecture board can make sure that those are within those architecture standards, I suppose. So then you got the program delivery, you're executing or implementing the guidelines that the EA and the solution architects have put together. You're bringing the architecture to life, implementing in the projects. You're ensuring that the projects aligns with those strategic goals. You're standardizing that process. Now, you'll notice that I've got those arrows going down and going back up. The key thing there is around an iterative feedback loop. So you're looping back, you're consulting, you're making sure things are done. And the program managers and project managers are key there because they're taking that information, business analysts, and they're making sure that that information comes back, and you're ensuring that your strategic outcomes are being aligned to what your program and your projects is, and you're making sure that you don't have siloed projects. You're making sure that they come back. So you might have project managers and you might have program managers looking over that. And it's always key to have that organizational change managers involved, particularly because they can talk a lot better than me. They basically make things a lot less complex when they talk about things in an architecture fashion. So they're really good getting that information out. It might be on the intranet, it might be fact sheets, but getting that information out that people can understand. So the whole framework, that strategic architecture framework, and we get into a lot more models, etc., when we run the course that we do. That talks about the governance structures, it talks about the architecture boards, it talks about the digital and information steering committees, business reference groups, like I was saying before, and then how that aligns the strategy, architecture, and the program delivery together. So talk a lot about synchronization. So we're trying to synchronize all these three aspects together, making sure that they're continuously aligned. I think one of the last things I wanted to say was around metrics. So make sure that the KPIs that are identified in the digital strategy are being achieved. They're making sure that the compliance is done. So the change managers are involved, the service managers are involved as well when they're implementing it. So making sure that there's handing like as-built architectures being given to the operational team, and it's not doesn't stay with the program team. So all of that stuff gives you that enabling the organizations to achieve that cohesive digital transformation.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks, Nige. So, in your consultancy work, do you have an example you can share on how you use the strategic architecture approach?
Yeah, yeah, I do. I'm just trying to. Yeah, I've got lots of examples, I suppose. One of the things that I try to do is, I guess, make sure that that strategic architecture approach is across all programs in what we do. And I was just thinking about this before because I know you're going to ask for an example. Um, I've looked I've looked on the internet, and I was looking at last night. It was just I don't know why I'm looking about strategic architecture, but I thought I'll do some preparation. But I noticed that there was some people that talked about doing strategic architecture in 2 hours, and I'm thinking, hang on a minute, have I got this all wrong? And then I listened to it, and they actually talked about writing a business strategy, and there's nothing wrong with that. And I guess strategic architecture is that in a way. And when I was thinking about like your question around examples, yes, that's what we have to do. So we need to know that the business strategy is there, or actually write it if it's not there. So I'll give you an example with that. I actually went out to a company to do a IT strategy, digital and IT strategy. And what became apparent was they didn't have a business strategy. And I was thinking, well, can I do the IT strategy without a business strategy? And I only got 15 minutes with the CEO, and I got from him, and it's quite a big company. I got from him the all these objectives, business objectives, what he needs to do, wrote it all down, and within a couple of pages, I had it all sort of marked up like a high level business strategy. So once I had that, I had the four themes. There was growth involved, there was customer experience, there was an 800% growth, I suppose, with the firm that was going to happen. So there was a lot of need for the IT to advance. So then when I started on the IT, I had a platform in place to be able to translate the business strategy to the IT. So that was a case where there was no business strategy, and we had to do some work on that. And we obviously went back to his senior team and then sort of discussed with that. But a better example, I suppose, with the full three boxes in place was when we worked with a commission in Australia, and when we were working there, we came up with the enterprise architecture. We also did the digital strategy, so we did the digital strategy as well. We then did a business case as enterprise architecture. We did the business case, and then we were involved in putting together what needs to happen with the program office. So you're probably nodding there, Jazz. You know the one I'm talking about. So we actually did all three, and the good thing about that one was, besides it was a huge success, we were able to get all those three in line, and that really sort of came back. And I actually had a conversation with one of the executives, and they said, what is this? This is not really enterprise architecture. This is not, yeah, how are you doing this? And it became quite simple. And it's not like we're doing rocket science, is we're just trying to get things in sync and making sure that programs are effective. So I think that was a good example. So what we needed to do, though, to do the digital strategy, was we needed to have a good understanding of the current state. So that's where the enterprise architecture came in. So with that involved, talking to the stakeholders, categorizing pain points, looking at people, process, information, technology. So categorizing into there, interviewing key stakeholders. We gave them the opportunity to describe the future state in their words. So then we started to jump into the digital strategy area, and that's where we came up with these themes. So there were six key themes that were in the digital strategy, and each of those themes, there were six executives, and each of those themes were owned by those executives. Now, I think this is important because you don't want to come with your predefined themes. You don't want to do that or force that. You need to encourage them and provide information, but it needs to come from the executive. And I think that was an important learning, and it's in all my practice. And I've worked with other consultants agencies. I haven't seen that done before, and I think it's pretty effective. And it's logical, but yeah, it's not done a lot. Things like, for instance, empower our employees to deliver. That was one of the things that came from the human resource chief officer. So really, because they were hamstrung by legacy systems and their processes that were in place, so they needed to be empowered to implement the change. They didn't need to be have it shoved on them. They needed to be involved in it. So there was other things like improving service delivery, reducing the processing times, enhancing your compliance, making sure that you're regulatory compliance, having transparency in there, optimizing efficiencies, reducing all the manual processes. And you'll find that a lot in digital transformations. If you can do that, you're a good step. And I know it's a lower level thing, but it's quite often those manual processes can kill you. So that was that was pretty key. I think on the enterprise architecture level, being able to do that business architecture on people, process, information, technology, but also to be able to go through the other layers like the data application, infrastructure, security, etc. So with that tight relationship between the digital strategy and enterprise architecture, it was easily for us to develop that business case, have that detailed list of initiatives, get that program management office in place, and then start delivering those things that seem to work pretty well. So key things there was having that agile delivery, executive, making sure that the roadmap was explained to the program office, the initiatives were explained, um, making sure that things like integration was explained, like the establishing an API framework, because beforehand they had uh, single sort of integration in place that wasn't adaptable for the circumstances. So moving them to RESTful APIs and all that sort of stuff with the APIs is important. Making sure that the automation was done as well, and that you had data validation checks in place. There was also user experience enhancements with the portal, so making sure that people could, when they had their processing of their jobs, they could go in there and find out the latest on what's happening, so that they weren't left in the dark, and removing things like paper-based and moving people from the phone calls to more the portal digital services. So that was key. Yeah, so Jackie, just a couple of other things I think was the strategic architecture helped as far as setting up the boards. I think having the architecture board, having a business reference group, and having the information steering committee and all set up with what they needed to find out, and using that strategic architecture approach to have good executive summaries, with flashy graphics, and really being able to explain things really well in a way that they could understand, and not hiding anything back. If there was issues, making sure that was front and center, and that they saw that straight away. So making sure that there was quarterly strategy reviews. So normally you could do it every 12 months, but because the transformation program was happening at a rapid pace, there needed to be that quarterly one to make sure that that was in place and the EA was following that, I guess. And then the performance metrics was key to make sure that we're hitting the mark on each of those metrics. So some of the results so far is a 50% increase in delivering some of the products. Better compliance seems to be a key thing. So having the ability to have that better compliance, paper-based workflows, so reducing that. So they're pretty much eliminated now, and bringing in some things like robotic process automation to allow for legacy systems that aren't integrated to be able to move things from between those, and other things like modular and scalable architecture, so that you don't have to do everything at once. You do an iterative design and you add those additional modules as you go. And having the continuous feedback loops has helped with implementation. And there's this other thing that sometimes you call them tiger teams or whatever, and I don't know whether that's a great term, but having like a cross-functional collaboration, bringing people in, so that the areas are involved in that are able to achieve some good results. So having that cross-functional team, they're from different parts of the organization, and they also have different skills, I suppose, different skill base from there. So yeah, so that's the example, Jackie. Well, two examples. I added a second one in there, sorry, but I was just thinking about it last night. But yeah, so there's definitely a lot of examples, and even though it's a fairly simple approach, it does have some really good benefits.
Yeah, great. So, Nigel, I'd love to know, are you born with the skills to be a strategic architect, or is that something that you have to learn?
Yeah, I think it's probably a combination of two. I'll just bring this next screen up. I think it's a combination of two between being born with it and being able to learn that. And I think you can learn, you can definitely learn anything in life. And I did an article that I put on LinkedIn just recently. So I won't. It's on LinkedIn. This one, how to be a strategic architect. So I won't go into too much detail, but I'll just make some comments there. I think one of the things there is strategic thinking. Generally, I've always been a bit of a strategic thinker, so that probably helps. But it's definitely a skill that you can take up as well. That you can try to think of the big picture, identify opportunities, on how you can get that impact goals together. So some of the work that I've done, where we've come in and done consultancies when we've seen that there's multiple vendors involved, and we can see that there's duplicated efforts, that muddying the waters, and the strategic thinking helps us to find that clear vision, streamline efforts, and get back to that the senior executive, I suppose, that has that needs to understand all these different issues that are happening. So the digital strategies can be relevant, and that takes a strong bit of strategic thinking to do, and so that they're not just reactive, and they you can continually focus on the long-term goals. So I think that strategic thinking one is possibly one that you're born with a little bit, but you're also able to learn those skills a little bit, because you just take a think about, get in the strategy zone, like you've got us in, Jackie, and then have a bit of a thought about what's possible. Yeah, so just quickly, some of those other skills like business acumen. It's always best to particularly when you're from that IT side, to make sure that you're thinking about the business change and the innovation and what's needed. So how can you be doing that, and keeping that, I guess, keeping the customer front and center with what you do. So things like leadership's also a skill with strategic architect, and not everyone wants to do, I guess, that leader role. But as a strategic architect, it's definitely in that space, and that you're trying to inspire and motivate others. I think with the advance of AI, we will find that AI will be doing a lot more of the automated tasks. So you'll be able to do a lot more leadership roles, and I'm talking about even Nick McDonald's. You'll be doing more responsible leadership roles, while the automated activities are being done more by AI and automation. That's what I can see happening, I think. Um, so when you've got organizational change, you need that leadership involved, and you've got to be able to pick up and report anything that you can see when it's going away from your digital strategy, and making sure that people know what's happening, I suppose, in what's being done. So yeah, so leaders are not necessarily micromanagers, but they get the best ideas from the team, and coordinate that. So I think leadership is also a skill that you're more born with a little bit, but you can definitely learn those things. Uh, tech, Technical translation, I think that's something you can definitely learn. I think technical translation is good because you need to adopt a few different hats. When you're talking to solution architect, or with a data um, data analyst, or say even a designer, or a data scientist sort of thing, you need to have a hat whereby you're listening to them and finding out the technology solution. But you can't necessarily talk in that way when you're talking to the executives. So you need to take take a bit of a step back and see what it is. Like I talked to a data scientist once, and they talked about this solution they were doing. They were very excited about it. Um, but it wasn't information that you could go to the executive until he said that, okay, this will reduce costs by 80%. And I said, well, that's what we've got to start with. That type of thing. You take the key parts of it when you're talking to the executive as you go. Um, so having that technology translation skills bridges that gap between the complex technical details that you have. So things like innovation is where the strategic architect shows their value. By harnessing the power of innovation, you can bring that together. Design workshops are also important, and yeah, being the data storyteller as well um, is key there. I think a data storyteller can tell a story about different parts of the data and how you got insights from that information as you go. So yes, that's a fairly bit of a long answer there, but I think there's definitely some skills that we can pick up on, we can use, but there's some skills that you basically can learn and improve. So yeah.
Yeah,
I've
of
always
course.
been I've yeah. I, I was just
I
going to
guess
say I've
it's
always
a
been in that
natural born
strategic.
leader.
Yeah, yeah, and that's the thing. So leadership in particularly is one that you want to have with people that want to have those roles, and a leader doesn't necessarily be a person that tells you what to do. It's more they bring out the best in the person. Yeah, I'd say. All right.
Absolutely. So, Nigel, I know that you've got a few more slides to take us through before we switch over to our next presenter. So, do you want to bring those slides up for us?
Yeah, I did have more, but I've talked too much as usual. So 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 what I'll do is I'll do it really
It's my
quickly.
job to move it along.
Yeah, exactly. So what
Oh,
I'll
thanks,
do.
Andrew. So we have two questions in the chat, Nige.
Okay, cool. Yep, I can do
So
those.
let me just try track those
Just
down.
just before I do that, Jackie, I'll just touch on this slide. It's got a lot to it, I think. But what I tried to do here was to represent all the all the challenges, I guess, that we've faced, and there's probably more, but I just wanted to represent all the challenges. And one of those things when we're talking about strategic thinking was to take a challenge and try to convert it into an opportunity. And that's what's shown there. So the move to people driven, for instance, you can look at that, and then the greater engagement with the customers is something that you focus on, and that enables you to take that challenge and turn it into a positive. So the courses that we run, I suppose, we do talk a lot more through these types of examples, and I've got some of that information here on the strategic architecture approach course, and it runs through those 5 sections. So that's really the last lots of slides that I had there, Jackie. So I'll stop the share there. But yeah, so that strategic approach is able to do that, the change in focus, I suppose, like we can do, and turn challenges into opportunities.
Absolutely. Okay, I'm going to read out a couple of questions that we have here. So, the first question, ideally, who should own the digital strategy within the organization, and how can architects closely integrate this with enterprise architecture?
Yeah, so I think I sort of answered that when I was talking about the executives owning the digital strategy and owning each of the themes of the digital strategy. So not only owning it, but writing it and being part of it. And then the enterprise architects need to be part of that delivering of that strategy and making sure it's delivered effectively in the programs that are done.
Of course. And so the last question here. These days, with our mission to entwine digital data and technology so tightly with business products and services, do we still need a digital strategy?
Yeah, absolutely, because you need to have that, and that's a good question because recently I was working on a project that didn't have a strategy, and I noticed how not having that strategy, we didn't have that like clear direction, the vision, and everything else, and it was kept running into issues with that okay, so we're going to do this, and then we had to do options analysis of okay, whether this option or that option. And I think some of those issues would have been worked out if we had a good strategy. So I think it's vital that the strategy's done, and it needs to be done first, but that's not the end of the story. It needs to be something that's not put on the shelf. It needs to be something that is continually re-advised as you go. So,
Of course. Well, guys, thank you so much for your questions in the Q&A throughout this entire conference. If anyone has any questions or anything to add, please continue to keep chatting. This is an awesome conversation to have. But Nige, that is your time up. So I'm going to cut you off there.
yeah, good idea.
But but thank you so much for your time, your knowledge, your expertise. You can now kick back and enjoy the rest of the conference. And I'm sure, well, I know that we'll be hearing from you a little bit later today. So thank you,
Thank you.
Nige.
Thank you.